Okay, welcome back everybody. This is where we left off with our website. We just did some advanced CSS stuff. We styled our header, styled some of our fonts, chose some fonts for a particular personality for the website. And now what I wanted to do, I'm not really done. I think I'll probably make another video after this, really sort of cleaning things up and doing some more advanced CSS stuff. But what I wanted to do is to make sure that I did a video on responsive design. So responsive design is designing a website that displays your content correctly or most effectively when the viewport or the size of your screen changes. So as we get larger, or more importantly as we get smaller, how can we design our content in such a way that it's conducive to the size of the screen. And so you can see right now there's things that are breaking in our site that don't look so good as the screen continues to get smaller. Okay, so let me just really quickly walk through the logic of responsive design. So the logic of responsive design basically is, in CSS, what we can do is we can specify what's called a responsive breakpoint. This is a point at which we're going to change the style of some existing style. And so we use this in CSS. We use what's called a media query. And you can see right here as I've pulled up on W3 School's website, a media query is a rule to include a block of CSS property for a certain condition. Okay, so in our case, our condition is the width of the screen. Okay, so we're going to use these media queries to go from a desktop view of our website to a more mobile view of our website. Okay. So I'm just going to walk you through sort of my process. There was an old sort of way of doing this where people would design for specific devices. So they would say the iPhone 6, its width is 670 pixels wide, so I'm going to design specifically, create a breakpoint specifically for the iPhone 6. And I'll create a breakpoint specifically for low resolution laptops, so like 1028 pixels wide. And so that was sort of an older way of thinking about responsive design. The way I like to do responsive now is to just make custom breakpoints, right? So decide, okay, right about there, things are starting to break, and definitely our footer starts to break way before that, right? So as you just slowly make the content smaller, what can we do? What do we see starting to look bad? What starts to break? Okay, and so one really important tool with responsive design. This is I'm in Mozilla Firefox. I've downloaded something called Mozilla Web Developer. Mozilla Web Developer. If you just Google it, it's an add-on for Mozilla, and it allows you to click this resize button, and it allows you to, I did display window size and title. So I click that and I can see this first number is what's most important to us. That's the width of the viewport. I can see the width in the title. So as I make it smaller and smaller, I can see exactly how many pixels wide the screen is. Okay, so that's an important tool as you're creating a responsive design. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, let's just fix where the footer starts to break, okay? Because I think at this width it still looks okay in our 3 columns, and our 2 columns look fine. Really, I don't want to collapse these into single column layout yet. And that's another thing I didn't mention. So eventually the goal is to go from our desktop layout to which has lots of different columns to our mobile layout, which is everything is basically one column, right? So everything is basically 100% wide. And so you can kind of see the difference. So that's the end goal. But before we get there, let's fix this footer just so you can see how these breakpoints work. So you can see the footer starts to break right there, right? So right before there, I'm going to say at 957 pixels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this media query, and I'll explain to you what's going on. I'm going to do it right at the bottom of my CSS file, and I'm going to just call this responsive design layouts. And I'm going to explain to you exactly what's going on here. So I created this style called media, at media, and then it's only screen, and then here's our condition, max width. So the maximum width where we want to begin this change is 957 pixels. So any changes to the CSS that I make inside of this media query will affect 957 pixels and smaller. Okay, so I'll say that one more time. Any change I make inside of this media query will affect 957 pixels and smaller. So it sort of cascades all the way down as you continue to get smaller. That's important to know. So the reason why this footer is breaking at this point, and by breaking I mean this, you see this text is overflowing. The reason why that's happening is our height, right? We set a height of 200 pixels here. So I wonder if I just change this to min height, I wonder if that fixes it. Nope. So I'm going to create a style inside of this media query called footer. So you're just going to call up your style, and you're going to actually create a whole new CSS style. So my curly bracket open and curly bracket closed. So it's sort of an embedded style inside of the media query. So we've said at media only screen, and we set a parameter, max width 957 pixels. Let's do something to the footer. So let's make the height of the footer 250 pixels, right? So we'll make it taller. So now that I refreshed, you can see there's more room. I'm going to just make it 550 pixels so you can really see the difference, right? See how much bigger that is now. But if we go above 957 pixels, it's back to 200. The height of the footer is back to 200. So right there, right? So once we get to 900, it makes it huge. Okay, I don't think we need to make it 550. I think we can keep it at 250 to house all of the content. And as we continue to get smaller, it breaks again. So we can either choose to create another media query, which I think is probably a bad idea, or we can just make this taller. Because again, any change we make at 957 is going to cascade all the way down as we continue to get smaller. Okay, so if I change this to 300 pixels, it can fit all of the information as we continue to get smaller. Okay, so that's the first little example. You can literally make any change to anything. Look, if I wanted, you wouldn't want to do this. I don't know why you would want to do this, but if I wanted to change the color of this font at a certain width, you could do that, right? So I could change the colors, anything, really anything. But we're really going to use our media queries to mess with layout mostly. So that's our first example. If we continue to make this smaller, at some point it's going to make sense that these columns are too small, too scrunchy, right? And so what I think I want to do is at 700, I think I want to collapse all of our all of these 3 columns and these 2 columns, I want to collapse these into 100% width columns. So just all the way across the screen. So to do that, what we can do is, let's see what's a good, let's do it right there, because that's really getting, so let's do it right there, 753 pixels. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually create an entirely new media query. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this whole line, this whole first line, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to close my curly bracket all the way down here, and I'm going to change the max width to 753 pixels. Okay, and so what we want to do is we want to change the width of these 3 columns and these 2 columns. Thankfully, we're working on our grid, so I'm going to open up our grid again, and all of our columns are controlled by these classes in our grid. So one thing we can do is we can just basically call up every single one of these classes and change them to 100%, the width 100%. Okay, so what we're doing is we're basically, instead of making these columns, we'll make them span 100% of the width. We'll also remove the margin left for all of these. So to do that, we'll just do 2, 3, and you can call up multiple classes by just using a column or a comma to separate them. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, sorry, 10, 11, and then 12 is, oh, we need 1 too, duh. We're going to open our curly bracket, so we want to make some change to these classes. Okay, so we'll say width 100%, margin left 0. Okay, if we did not specify margin left 0, it would just inherit margin left 2%, and everything would be bumped over 2%. So any styles that are in your main style sheet will override, need to be overridden in your media query if you want to actually make a change to that particular style. Okay, so basically what we've done here is we've said on every single column we're just going to make it 100% wide. So if I refresh, let's make sure that we save that. Okay, so the issue is it's not working because I have accidentally have 2 typos. So typos will kill you. So I had 2 periods at the end of a few of these classes. So I think they all look good now. Now when I refresh, they're all spanning 100% of the viewport. Okay, so that's looking good. So again, at anything before 753, we still have our normal layout. Anything smaller than 753, we change to our single column layout. And now our footer is causing us issues again. And so what we can do is, because these are all stacked on top of each other now, it's much taller. So what we can do is we can change, and there's a better way to do this, but I'm just not going to bother at this point. We'll change this to 400 pixels. Not big enough still. Change it to 500. So we're just changing the height of the footer so that it fits the content. Great. So as we continue to get smaller, we're collapsed down to one column and we're looking decent. This is going to look decent on a phone, not perfect, but decent. And then really the last thing we need to worry about is the nav bar seems to break when we get really small. So once we get to 342, it breaks. So to fix that, we can do a few things. But the first thing we'll do is we'll open up a new media query at 342. So we'll do it at the very end here. So we kind of go from biggest to smallest. So you can kind of see the methodology here. We have one breakpoint at 957, another at 753, and now another at 342. And so what we'll do here is I'll open my curly bracket, close it way at the bottom. We want to change what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the font size for both this Chris Lamb's website and for the size of our navigation buttons. So let's see. Chris Lamb's website is controlled by header H1. So I'm going to open up header H1. And I'm going to say font size. The current font size is 36 pixels. I'm just going to say font size 26 pixels. Make it a little smaller. Okay, so that's a little smaller. That's nice. And I think that might. Oh no. Okay, so it's still broken. So what we'll do with this nav bar is we'll make this font a little smaller too. So our font size is 20 pixels right now. So what we can do is nav li font size 16 pixels. See if I can make the font size smaller. So now it's small enough to fit on one line still. And that should do it. Great. So everything is looking decent. One thing I did notice is this is a little bit off in terms of being centered. That's bothering me because I'm OCD. So the reason why that's happening is because I put padding on this navigation element. I put padding to the left and the right of each of these list items. So I'm going to go up to CSS line 30 to fix that. So instead of putting any padding to the left of these elements, I'm just going to do padding right 30 pixels so that it's only adding padding to the right of these elements and not the left. So that was throwing it off by 15 pixels. So I think if we collapse it smaller again, you'll see it looks more centered. It looks better. And it doesn't seem to break anywhere else. The other thing you could do, and I'm not going to really walk through it, is change font size as you get smaller. I do recommend, though, to just use what's called responsive font sizing or responsive typography. I've got a video that I'll link to in the notes at the bottom of the video, and you can kind of see how to implement a responsive typography system. And that allows the text to get smaller as the screen gets smaller. But as you can see, it's pretty easy, right? So just to kind of recap, all we really did was we introduced this bit of logic, which is called a media query, and we set the condition is the most important. We set a condition that said at this particular width of the screen, let's make some change. So what you'll do is as you investigate your own websites is when you make it smaller, you just want to find a place where things start to break. And by break, I mean they're not looking right. They're just not looking how you intended them to look. And so this is going to look decent. Obviously, there needs to be things that need to be cleaned up, but this is going to look decent on a tablet or a mobile device in a way that not doing any responsive design would not look decent. The other thing I want to do real quickly is to tell you about what's called the Meta Viewport in HTML. So if you let's see. Let's do the W3 schools. So this allows you to, so you want to copy this right here, and it allows you to set an initial viewport width. And you want to paste it right into your head tag of your HTML file. And you want to do this for all of your HTML files. So again, if you've got 3 files on your website or 3 pages on your website, you have to put this in all 3 pages. And this will allow you to set an initial scale for your mobile device. If you don't set this, sometimes when you render a website on a mobile device, it won't render properly. It won't render this responsive layouts properly. So that's one little thing that you will need to add in. All right, I think that's it. So basically the idea is collapsing columns into multiple columns into a single column so that you get a decent looking layout for your website. All right, until next time, may the force be with you.